Yo, what's happening, guys? It's Jim Cody back with another video this week. And we didn't do a video last week just because I got a little busy and wrapped up and stuff. But we are definitely doing a video this week. And it's something I've been promising to bring to you guys for quite a long time now. Something a lot of people have asked me to do, which is give a tour of my fantasy world, my fantasy setting that I use for my fantasy role-playing sessions. So that's what we're going to do tonight. And just a little bit of background about where the setting came from and whatnot. So I started this setting in, I think, 2018. And what happened is I basically got a group of all brand new players except for one. And we started playing D&D 5th edition because that's what they wanted to play. And I quickly realized I didn't like, I was running it in Forgotten Realms too. And I quickly realized how much I hated the Forgotten Realms. Well, I don't hate the Forgotten Realms, but how much I really didn't like it that much, or running it, and how much I really despise 5th edition D&D. So I was like, hey, you guys got to taste what this is all about. Let's play something better. So they were all about it. So we started playing Castles and Crusades, which in my opinion is a much better game. And I started using one of my own settings, like I usually do, like I've always done. I've always made up my own settings. Back in the day, and it was no different here. But then I decided, so back in the day, whenever I would start like a D&D campaign or some other fantasy game, I would always make up a new setting for every campaign. And I was always looking for, the setting I was going to stick with for life. I wanted to make that setting I'd stuck with for life, but never could settle on anything. So finally, I decided that setting I made for that campaign, which the campaign went for quite a while, and it was a really good campaign and very memorable. I liked it so much, I was like, this is my setting for life, and I'm just going to keep building off of this setting. So that's what I've done, and that's what this setting is. So it's been something that's continuously changed and evolved since 2018. It's still changing and evolving, and probably still will even further in the coming years. And it's also something that's been a collaborative effort, not just, it hasn't all come from me, it's also come from my players. They've added little bits here and there when they want to. I don't ever tell people they have to. If they don't fill in the gaps, I'll fill in the gaps. But if they want to fill in some gaps somewhere, we can have a collaborative discussion and, really come up with something, especially if it's an area that's not well detailed. And I leave a lot of holes and stuff open for people so they can create their own details. And it's kind of cool because my players have become really immersed and invested, in the world because they kind of created it with me through play, right? So it's really cool. And it's the setting I've used for all my fantasy campaigns since 2018, basically. So, I wanted to create this video to show you guys, give you a little tour of the world and talk about all the different lands. And also, I just want to, say that, there's nothing special or particularly that amazing or interesting about my setting, and I really don't care. I wanted to keep it pretty generic, and it is a more grounded and low magic, I would say, sort of mid to low fantasy. It still has all the fantasy elements in it, but it's very human-centric. And it's quite a bit low magic, and it's more based off stuff that I love from history, classical literature, and classical mythology, and the Arthurian tales, and Greek mythology, and all this stuff that I read growing up, as well as of course all the famous tropes that we love, like Lord of the Rings. It was heavily inspired by Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to take a look here. This is my new map that I'm still working on, by the way, but it's pretty much fleshed out, so I feel comfortable enough to talk about it now. So what I call this is the known lands of the Ilian Sea. The world is actually called Voldara, though I might change that. I've never really said what the whole world is called. I've just always talked about the kingdoms of the Ilian Sea, and we might change the name there. Now you can see that there's not everything fleshed out here. Like I have this island over here that's hasn't been finished, and I'm still thinking about what that's going to be. And yeah, so not everything's fleshed out, but I have enough fleshed out where I can, comfortably talk about it with you guys. So the lands of the Ilian Sea, like I was talking about earlier, it's a low magic. It's a pretty low magic setting. Magic is pretty rare. It's a dying thing. Demi-humans are rare. There are elves and dwarves and halflings and whatnot, but they're very rare as well and fading away from the world. It's human-centric, but even the human populations are pretty thinned out because of a great catastrophe that happened an age and a half ago, and also just, pestilence and plague and war. And yeah, so that's kind of like the general, feel of this campaign world. It's a world that's not united, and it is, all these kingdoms have their own problems, and they're all kind of crumbling apart. Religion is kind of a dead thing, but it's starting to make a comeback. There are clerics and stuff too, but they're extremely rare. But they do exist. If you play a cleric, you just know that there's not going to be temples everywhere, and some cleric that's going to cure disease and all that stuff everywhere you go. So that's the kind of setting I wanted, and that's the kind of setting I've got here. So we'll just kind of take a tour and go around the lands of the Ilian Sea, and this is the Ilian Sea, as it's called. And it's, very inspired by, of course, Europe and the Mediterranean and Middle Earth and stuff like that. So we'll start here, which is the Kingdom of Caledon. Now, Caledon is a wet, temperate kind of place, very much inspired by Celtic mythology and, of course, England and Britain and Ireland and Scotland. And the duchies of Caledon was once the kingdoms of Caledon. It was ruled by a king, but 20 years ago, the king died, and there are 5 noble houses that are, on the brink of war. An heir hasn't been decided, and, civil war can happen any time, though it hasn't broken out yet, but there has been minor skirmishes and battles and conflicts. But it's a place of betrayal and assassination and tyranny, and it's just a place rife for adventure, right? So you've got the 5 different noble houses, and I'm going to take a look at my document here just to remind myself the types of people you could meet in Caledon. So there are different racial stocks in Caledon. The main racial stock, of course, is the Caledonians, who are a mix of the Lysian and Durrani blood. And now the Durrani, let's talk about the Durrani first. So the Durrani are the ancient people that originally lived in Caledon. They're the rarest of the stock nowadays, but they were the original inhabitants of the place. They're fairer of skin. You could think of them basically as, the kind of the Britons, the ancient Britons or Welsh or kind of thing. And they reside on the Isle of Balferia. Now, the Isle of Balferia is right here, even though I don't have it labeled yet. And the Isle of Balferia is controlled by the House of Durini, which is a matriarchal house controlled by women. It's always passed down through the women. And they are also, sorceresses and magic users. And it definitely kind of plays off that kind of like Morgan Le Fay kind of thing. So the Durrani are definitely more magically inclined than a lot of the other people of Caledon, and that's kind of what the Durrani are all about. The Caledonians, which are the most common people of Caledon, are of course a mix of Lysian and Durrani blood, and the Lysians, we'll talk about the Kingdom of Lys here in a little bit, which is next door to Caledon to the west. The Lysians are the bloodline of the ancient Lysian Empire, which is basically my equivalent of the Romans, right? After there was an age of called the Age of the Shattering, where basically they call it a star in this world because they don't understand all the science and stuff, but it was basically an asteroid hit the planet and wiped out a lot of the population, caused havoc, and brought the world to a post-apocalyptic dark age. And some of the elves, the elves knew this was going to happen and retreated underground with the dwarves, and came out after this was over and started spreading across the world, and taught what was left of humanity how to rebuild again. And out of that ashes came the Lysian Empire, which became the most dominant and most powerful empire the known world has seen. But the Lysian Empire died, and it was split up into between 6 different suns. You know, if you know your history, you know where that comes from. You can tell I borrowed a lot of stuff from real world history here. And that's where you get the modern kingdoms from. So the Lysians are descendants of the ancient Lysian Empire. So the Caledonians are a mix of that and the native Duranis. Then we have the God Hill, and the God Hill are the basically think Scottish. They're Scots, and they reside up here in the Highlands. And of course, Glenmoran is their seat of their royal house, and they're seen as outsiders in Caledon, and they've been rebellious. And they are kind of a mix of Caledonian blood and the Varashi, which the Varashi are barbaric people that live up here in the Wilderlands, which the Varashi Wilderlands is labeled here, but it actually extends all the way out to probably over here, if you can see my mouse, and all the way over here past the White River. All this area here, this big area here, is considered the Wilderlands. And it's, there's not many people that live there, but there's lots of these Varashi wild men tribes that live there. And the Varashi are barbaric, nomadic tribes that live in the forest and all this Wilderland. There's also, of course, this is where you find your orcs and your goblins and your trolls and all your nasty things is out in the wilds. And especially if you travel out in the Wilderlands, this is where you find it. So the Glodhill are very stout, very proud people, and of course, like the Scots in the real world, they have a lot of that. Like they are divided up into clans because they were kind of they're distantly related to the Varashi and still hold a lot of that clannish mentality. So that's the Glodhill, the Glodhill, and then you have the Dorn. And they're a mix of Caledonian stock and sea raiders from Tehran. And they are darker skinned people. And basically what happened is they were raiders that came up from Tehran a couple hundred years ago and raided this area called Black Rock in Caledon. And the king of Caledon at the time basically made a deal with them and hired them as mercenaries. And then finally granted them this piece of land here. And so they became a noble house of their own called House Sarisia. And so these people settled here and mixed with the local population. And now you have a whole nother, race, basically. And they're actually like very, very much stand out amongst the rest of the lighter skinned people of Caledon. So that is basically Caledon. Also, you have the 3 shires here, and this is where the civilized halflings live. Now, the halflings have, throughout history, up until just a few hundred years ago, were wanderers. They were like gypsy wanderers that traveled in caravans. They were performers and, that kind of thing. Performers and entertainers and storytellers and collectors of oral lore and all that stuff. But they were persecuted. These halflings that settled here were persecuted when they were living around here in Estolia. And because of war and strife and persecution, they kept wandering this way until they ended up in the duchies of Caledon. And the king of Caledon at the time gave them this land to settle, which has become the 3 shires. And they've settled down, and they've basically become your standard stock hobbits or halflings, right? Because I like that traditional, Lord of the Rings or Hobbit style, like Bilbo Baggins kind of halflings, and that's very much what these are. So I wanted that in my game, and I've always had that in my game, and so that's where these halflings reside. Now there are still wandering halflings, which the halflings just call the Wanderers. And they still wander around the world, though they are not as numerous as they once were. They still do exist. So you've got basically 2 choices of different halflings you want to play. Also, there are wood elves here, but they're very, very reclusive and very rare. And they reside in the Elderwood Forest, as well as there's said to be some here in the Wildwood. But the people of Caledon know for sure because they have a truce with the Wood Elf King, that they will not intrude upon what's left of his forest. At one time, this was all one big, forest that the elves controlled, and now it's been, pretty much deteriorated to this. So they've made a treaty with the Wood Elves, though, that treaty has been broken, and minor conflicts have broken out on occasion, but in recent years, nobody's broken the truce with the Wood Elves, and they rarely come out of the woods, with a few exceptions. Now, the Wood Elves, like I said, are reclusive, but younger Wood Elves are sent out on what they call, their wandering. So when they come of age, they're given a choice to go outside the woods, and encouraged to actually and explore the world and get to know more about the world and learn about the world and gather as much knowledge as they can. And then whenever they feel ready, they can come back, to the Elderwood and settle down for life. So that kind of gives a reason why there would be, a Wood Elf adventurer if somebody wanted to play a Wood Elf. But this is where the Wood Elves reside. Here is in the Elderwood. Now, let's go down to, that's basically the Duchies of Caledon. Let's go down to Darkfall. So Darkfall was created through play. So this was created in my first campaign, and the king of Darkfall is King Andalin, a elven wizard. And he was actually a character from that first campaign. That was Chase's character. And in that campaign, they were granted this Duchy of Darkfall. Now, Darkfall used to be a very lawless and dangerous place, full of monsters and bandits, and these bandit rogue kings and barons, robber barons and whatnot. And King Andalin and his compatriots annexed the land and drove off all the dark forces, and created the free country of Darkfall. And it's home to any free peoples around the world, but basically there's not a huge population here, and most of the kingdom is basically just made up of here. And it's also sort of a republic, so King Andalin has a representative from the humans, the dwarves, and the elves, and they all give counsel to the king, and they all come up with decisions and govern the lands together. Now, the men of Darkfall, the humans of Darkfall, are actually closely related to the what do you call them? I already forgot the name now. The Durrani, which are these people, the original people we were talking about that live on the Isles of Balfaria. They're actually descended from the same kind of people, though they, they're a little bit mixed, maybe with the Ilians and whatnot. They're very, very similar and related, very close cousins, right? Now, Illisgard over here is an ancient elven city that's been rebuilt and restored. And the wandering Grey Elves, the Grey Elves have been wandering for, well over, 1,000 years now, or longer, 2,000 years probably. A lot of them have settled down here in Illisgard and built this new city, this sanctuary of refuge. That's a place of lore and knowledge and peacefulness and learning, and it's guarded by magic, and it's also guarded by a dragon, which there's a story behind the dragon too, but that's something I'd like people to experience through play. So yeah, the Grey Elves have been attracted here because of the Elven King Andalin, and they've rebuilt this old city and made Illisgard. You also have the Dwarven city of Tor, which also swears fealty to Darkfall. And the ancient city of Tor has been around since so legend says, since, the Shattering. It was built way back when, so it's thousands of years old. And so it's been there ever since. Of course, the populations of the dwarves has been dwindling over the years. And this is really the largest concentration of dwarves. You will find dwarves outside of Tor. There's, a few scattered around Caledon and, some other places, but mostly the Dwarven clans still live in the Undercity of Tor, and still mine here in the Dragontail Mountains, and are still, they're dwarves. They're known for what you would know them for. They're great crafters and miners and all that stuff. I didn't really change anything about the dwarves. And there is some lore and clans and stuff about the dwarves, because one of my players in one of the campaigns was a dwarf cleric, and me and him expanded upon a little bit about the dwarf clans and lore and stuff. So that's that. Next we have the Isles of Ilia. Now this is probably my favorite place, and the Isles of Ilia is based off essentially Renaissance Italy. And the saying goes, if you're in Ilia, watch your purse and watch your back. And the people of Ilia are a mix of different cultures, but they're basically the original people that settled here long ago, and that survived the shattering. Though over the years, with the sea raiders of Tehran and invading countries and goings back and forth, they've mixed with all kinds of different cultures, and so they really vary in skin tones, either from an olive skin to very, very dark skinned. They do share a common language, and basically each of these islands is ruled by the Dons, which are overlords of their own island. Though there is the head Don, which resides here in Liros on the island of Lamnia. And so the people of Ilia are known as swarthy and untrustworthy and thieves and pirates. And pirates is piracy is not frowned upon in Ilia, and thievery is not frowned upon in Ilia. Only if you get caught is it frowned upon. And the other thing they're known for is they are known for dueling, and duels are a common occurrence, though not always to the death. And so that kind of gives you an idea of what Ilia is like. They're very flamboyant. They wear very colorful clothes, and they eat very spicy food, and they definitely stand out amongst all the other lands of the Ilian Sea. And that's why it's called the Ilian Sea, is because the Isles of Ilia dominate the center of the sea. Next, let's take a look at the city-states of Morn. Now, the city-states of Morn were built 300 years ago by barbarian tribes, the Varashi tribes, essentially. And there's varying types of Varashi. They're not all the same, but the people, all the other places in the Isles of, or the kingdoms of Ilia, just see them as all the same, but they're actually not the same. It's kind of like the Romans saw, the barbarians. They just called them Gauls or Goths or whatever, but there was a lot of different types and variations. And so that's what the city-states of Morn were founded under. And with the help of the dwarves, they settled down and created the great city of Byzantia, which is just east here of the Dragontail Mountains. And soon 2 other cities, came about, Dawnhouse and Arndorf. And they're have very close ties to the dwarves. And they also became quite wealthy because of the gold mines in the mountains, and they helped the dwarves, mine the mountains and stuff. And there's a lot of dwarves that live amongst the Mornish people. So you'll find quite a few dwarves, which the dwarves of Tor just call city dwarves. You'll find quite a few dwarves in the city-states. Now, they're called city-states because they all govern themselves, but they do have a council that meets every so often to decide matters. If they are under attack or there's threat of war, there's some kind of trouble, they will come to each other's aid. But mostly they've become known for their development of weapons and their wealth, and also their trade to the far east. So yeah, that's pretty much the city-states of Morn, and you could pretty much think of them as they're very German and Eastern European influenced, and they're also known for their mercenary companies, which they hire out all across the lands. Now, you also have right next here that divides the Far East is the Great Caldari Plains. And in the Caldari Plains, you have the Caldari tribesmen, which are another barbarian-type people. They're horse people that train the wild horses and have for centuries in the plains. And they're nomadic people, and they're very similar to a lot of the, the steppe horses. They're very inspired by the steppe horse people and also Native American tribes and stuff. So it's kind of a mix. Think of like Mongols and Huns, but also mixed with Native Americans, and that's kind of what the Caldari are. So it's kind of like the Huns, but they have feathers and stuff like that. And they're also hired out as, people do hire the Caldari as mercenary horsemen because they make great light horsemen. And occasionally they will raid into the city states. And, they have been known to reach even as far south into Tehran and Darkfall and even into Caledon. So, but they're usually not overly aggressive. They usually just fight more amongst themselves and with the nations to the east, which we're not going to talk about tonight. So that's that. Next up, we have the Kingdom of Lys. And of course, the Kingdom of Lys is the old seat of the empire, the Elysian Empire. And it is not this, it is, a sorry shadow of its former self and glory of the old empire. And it's been ruled by the Elysian household for all this time since the old empire, and it's still being passed down through the same bloodline, even if it is just cousins or whatnot. But in recent years, a young king has taken over, and this young king has decided that he's going to make the Kingdom of Lys great again. And so he, a couple decades ago, the Kingdom of Lys was at war with Estolia, and they lost all this land around here, around the Iredale River, just west of the Iredale River. And he has already annexed this land, and he's been building up an army, and it's said that he is even thinking about daring to go over the Griffin Claw Peaks and invade Estolia once again. So yeah, that's pretty much the Kingdom of Lys. They're also known for their heavy cavalry, their knights. The Knights of Lys are the greatest heavy cavalry in the known lands. And there's a bunch of knightly orders. You do not have to be a noble to be a knight in the Kingdom of Lys. But, usually it is the nobles and people of higher birth that, automatically get a spot in one of the knightly orders. And, of course, they're an arrogant people, and at least they seem arrogant to, all the other peoples, all the other lands and kingdoms and such. Though they might not seem arrogant to themselves. But they're also the most advanced as far as, like, weapon technology, sciences, medicine, art, fashion, especially the fashions and stuff. All the other kingdoms kind of copy the Kingdom of Lys. And so they're old rivals of the Republic of Estolia. And they've also, fought wars with Caledon too. But it's been a long time since, it's been a while since that has happened as well. So that's the Kingdom of Lys. Next, we have the Republic of Estolia. As it says, the Republic of Estolia is a republic. Let me look at my notes here. And they are ruled by the Potentate, who is also in turn takes the ear of the Senate, who is made up of representatives that are voted in by the people of Estolia. Their army is known for their pikemen. Though they have a varied army, crossbowmen, archers, all that stuff, but they're known for their pikemen because they've been fighting the heavy cavalry of Lys for so long. They've become quite good at using pikes to defeat the heavy cavalry of Lys. They're also known for a couple more things. They're known for their sword masters, the weapon master, the sword masters of Estolia. There are sword schools all over Estolia. Dueling, again, is not a uncommon thing in Estolia, though not as prevalent as in Ilia. It's still a thing that happens, but for good reason in Estolia, usually. But swordsmen are, the greatest swordsmen in the world are trained in Estolia, and people from all over the world come to Estolia to train in one of the great sword schools and become a sword master or a weapon master of Estolia. The other thing they're known for is the Order of Eris, which is a secret order, And nobody knows their real thing except for the highest ranks in the order. But it is said they have gathered great wealth and knowledge and lore. And they're also known to have powerful magic users in their midst and train magic users and take in. They actually go out and find and recruit potential magic users. But they also have powerful warriors called Inquisitors, which are sword mages. They go around hunting rogue wizards or really powerful monsters, and generally, sometimes they'll hire themselves out as mercenaries, and their whole deal is quite unknown and mysterious. But it just gives something for if a player wants to belong to that order, they can. And we can talk more about it, which, there is more details about it, but it's kind of like the secret thing that not many people know about. So that's the Republic of Estolia. To the north, we have Vornheim. This is the Viking kingdom, right? And the people of Vornheim are said to be descended from giants. So it's said in ancient times they actually mixed with the giants, and that's why they're so massively huge. And so most of the Vornish people are 7 or 8 foot tall and massive Viking-looking dudes. They worship the spirits of the dead and their ancestors. And, of course, they're raiders. Not just sea raiders, they're also land raiders. And quite good at it, though they tend to fight amongst themselves more than they fight with other countries. They have been known to gather big armies and try to invade Estolia and Lys and things like that, but it's pretty rare. Usually they just send out raiding parties. And though there is a king of Vornheim, the king is always coming and going because death is always awaiting you in Vornheim. It's a dark, really dark, cold, desolate place. And of course, they're constantly at war with the Varashi tribes up here, all these barbarian tribes that live up here in the far north as well. So that's the Vornheim for the people that want to play a Viking. Cool. It's there. And then to the south, finally, this is probably the last thing we're going to talk about, is Tehran. And Tehran is this very dry, humid, desolate, hilly, mountainous country, home to the Tehranians, which are a mix of different peoples from this region, but mostly they've come to be one racial stock. And they are also known as raiders and sea raiders. And they live in tribes and they're nomads. And most of them don't live in civilized areas. There's only one major city in Tehran, and that's Kadisi. And their leader, I forget what I called him here, actually. Let's see. Their leader is known as the Pasha. And each tribe has their own leader known as the Rahad. So that is the people of Tehran. To the south here in the desert is the desert of Sarad. And the desert of Sarad is home to the Bajit, which are nomadic desert people that will occasionally come out of the desert and raid into Tehran. And the Bajit and the Tehranians are very frequently, fighting little skirmishes with each other across the river and such, as you can imagine. So that's basically the lands of the Ilian Sea, the known lands of the Ilian Sea. We've been going for about 30 minutes, which pretty good, I guess. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. I hope you enjoyed the look at my map. If you want to know how I created this map, I used Incarnate, which you can look it up, incarnate.com. And it's a pretty cool mapping software. I think it's become my favorite mapping software. I'm not good at Photoshop or any of that stuff, so this is a really easy, nice way for me to do it. So, go check that out if you want to know how I did. There's other programs out there too, like Wonder Draft, which I'm not familiar with. And of course, the old Hexagrapher, which I think is still a good program. So anyways, I hope you guys have found this informative, found it interesting. Let me know if you have, and maybe in the future we'll talk more about these places and talk more about the known lands of the Ilian Sea. So we'll see you guys next time. Hope you all have a good week. Peace. We'll see you next time.